This meeting is now being live streamed.
Okay, good evening and welcome everyone attending this meeting. Is being live streamed on YouTube, so welcome to everyone viewing online. Concerning meeting etiquette, please may I ask that you indicate you wish to raising your physical hand. People online should raise their virtual hand. Monitor of the screen of hands will be considered. Please bear in mind that myself as a chair, I cannot see the screen behind me. When addressing the committee, anyone attending remotely, please turn on your camera. Please note that the chat function on Zoom will not be used for questions and answers on the agenda, but you may communicate via the clerk. In addition, if there is an issue with the sound in the chamber, please let me know, as the mics can accidentally switch off. I've also been asked to remind members and officers to speak clearly in the chamber so the clerk and the public can hear you. The last meeting, the Labour vacancy on the committee has been filled by Councillor Melanie Onova. Open up the next. Okay, welcome, Councillor. She's in attendance here. At the full meeting of Council held on the 22nd of July, it was agreed to extend the terms of the independent chair, myself, and the independent member, Kulsum Seth, for a further year to August 2025, with any further extensions subject to a benchmarking review of the independent membership of the committee. Members, you know I say this every meeting, but we really do have a packed agenda tonight, as you can see by the room. So some reports will need more time than others, and I'm hoping to move on where necessary, and you can still be able to answer the question, all of the questions that you have. Okay, item 1, apologies for absence and substitutes. I've received apologies from Councillors Garfield and Lee Parkway. Are there any other apologies from members?
I've not received any other.
Thank you, Clerk. Declarations of interest to those members who are physically present. Are there any declarations of interest? Thank you. Item 3, minutes of the last agenda. Members are requested to consider and agree the accuracy of the decisions in the minutes of the last audit committee held on the 17th of July 2024. Are there any matters of accuracy? Thank you. Are the minutes agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 4, action log. The committee is asked to note the contents of the action log. Since the agenda publication, response has been circulated for the following action. AC 218, Jane figures. I'm aware that one member has asked. I intend that we consider Tell Jane under item 11, risk management update, risk 401, people culture. In addition, in respect of AC 117, passes learned, the clerk has since been advised the overview and scrutiny committee recommended that affected residents be compensation. The action will stay open pending the outcome of this recommendation. Are there any questions on the action log? Thank you.
I've got
Yes.
232 was in the strikeout notice, and 243 on Treasury Management was still waiting from July.
Someone say it again, Councillor Paul.
Sorry, 243 Treasury Management. I asked a question. Not been answered.
Okay. Pauline, could you follow?
And on 232 on strikeout as well.
232.
I'll chase up officers.
Munir is here. She can respond to that.
I'll chase up and I'll respond.
I'll be in writing a minute. Thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions on the action log? Okay, to members present in the room, may I see by a show of hands is the report noted? Now consider the substantive agenda items. You have the option to allow the meeting to continue beyond 9:30 by stuck for time, we continue till 10 o'clock. Okay, item 5, quarterly report of contract waivers. I'd like to take the report as read, and we would like to allocate 5 minutes for this. Are there any questions on the report? Katerina Olajimo?
Katerina's online.
Katerina?
here. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got a question on waiver 2797. 35,000 paid for critical friend support. I did ask the clerk before the meeting for a copy of the documentation, all the information relating to this. And in bearing in mind, I'm making an assumption, but willing to prove incorrect. This was linked to the social housing regulator.
Sorry, could you speak up, please?
Sorry, this was linked to the social housing regulator. What was proffered and what support amounts to 35,000?
So, Chair, perhaps I could take that one in the
Yes.
first instance. So, Paul, I'm the Corporate Director of Resources. Of course, the item is here to show where waivers against standing orders have been granted as opposed to specific issues to do with the detail of each individual contract. I'm aware that the detail Councillor Paul requested this morning or this afternoon has been circulated. We don't have housing officers here if there are detailed questions on precisely what, you know, the content of that contract was or anything like that. Obviously, we're happy to take those up outside of the meeting, but we don't have the people here who would have that detailed knowledge of that particular contract. In fairness, the item is here to explain waivers rather than contract.
Update on what that was.
Yep.
35,000 does seem a lot of money for mentoring.
Okay,
That's fine.
okay. Anything further? Any other comments? Okay,
I can take it as an action, yes.
all right, this report is for noting to members present in show of hands. Is the report noted? Thank you. Item 6, the annual complaints report and the handling of any reports from the local government ombudsman annual report. This is a substantive report, well written, and I thank the officers involved. I'm allocating 20 minutes for this item. I will take this report as read, but we'd like the officers to explain why Housing Ombudsman Service maladministration rate has increased from 33% to 87%. And secondly, to explain the new regime of the regulator of social housing. Is this in response to Grenfell, for example, and what additional pressures does it put on the service, and do we have adequate resources? So I invite officers James Partis and Olivia Shaw to respond. Could you just, that's you two, okay. Any questions on this report? Councillor Chadder, please.
I note the draft complaints policy that's put on there. I'd welcome a discussion about the response that you've had, noting that you've only had 4 people responding as part of the formal consultation, but it did go to Cabinet yesterday as well. So I'd like to know the process for that. And also, once we get into a discussion about that, I think that will answer some of my questions. And also, what's happened to our commitment to getting it right the first time? Because these figures are still not where we would ideally like them to be. And this is now, I think, the 3rd complaints report I've seen. It's just, we're just stonewalling, aren't we? We're just not getting any better at this at all. And I think, given today's events as well, it's really, really important that we start seeing some action on this now.
Okay, James, can you just respond to questions I had first, and then Councillor Chadder, please.
And I'll bring in my colleague Olivia Shaw, who's the Assistant Director of Resident Experience. So I'm James Partis, Assistant Chief Transformation Officer. The Housing Ombudsman report is one of the first instances opportunities we've had to bring together a kind of single, integrated report around housing complaints performance as a separate document. And that's one of the kind of aspects of housing regulatory change that has come to bear as part of the establishment of the regulator. We have seen a really significant increase in both the sort of volume and total number of contacts relating to queries raised about kind of housing services, the new consumer standards which the regulator has put into place, and the kind of associated national campaign. The increase in number of maladministrations, I think, it does demonstrate a sort of quite significant ongoing challenge around the kind of provision of sustainable housing services in the borough. And, it'll be remiss of me to not obviously reference the kind of significant findings that the regulator has made reference to today. I know there will be separate opportunities for the committee to talk about that. But in essence, we are seeing a kind of significant increase in volume and contact rate around housing services, both as a result of the regulator's standards and guidance being more formally clarified, but also the known issues in the service are kind of present there. We have seen some improvement in the back end of the year, particularly in terms of sort of timeliness of responding to those complaints and the ability for the service to kind of manage what is a significant demand. And I think it is fair to say that there is a link between the ability of the complaint service to respond to complaints, the timely response to complaints, and the ability to provide early resolution to those complaints, which is linked to a reduction in maladministration. And if vice versa is true, the slower we are to respond to complaints and resolve issues, the more likely it is that residents will end up with a maladministration finding as a result of that when going to the Ombudsman. Olivia can comment more on the sort of specific regulatory environment around that and sort of context for the Ombudsman report.
So the only other bits I'd add around the Housing Ombudsman is their powers also changed about a year ago as well. And I think off the back of their own powers changing, they very much became a much more predominant advocate for residents and inviting tenants to make complaints, particularly around damp and mould because of the national issues. So I'm not going to go as far as say they were a victim of their own success, but they have been very active in encouraging residents to come forward, which is naturally going to increase the volume. And they do have a much higher caseload. So I know some of the cases that are referenced in this report, the actual issue was 2 years ago in some of those instances. And that's how long it's taken them to work through some of their caseload. So that's not to make excuses, but I think it's just useful context that by advocating for their residents and essentially saying, please come forward with your issues, that raises the case rate, it raises your maladministration rates. And there is lots of legacy cases in that batch. That's kind of a contributing factors, I suppose I'd say.
Okay, Abby?
Sorry, Chair, it's just a suggestion. So one of the things I would like us to bring back is a substantive item on the RSH inspection, and I do think we need to connect it into some of the complaints. The committee has a rounded view.
Yes.
Because you'll see some of the issues around the housing complaints is also noted in the regulations. I think a fuller discussion will be needed with the things at the same time.
Pick up Lisa's question.
Yeah, it was
Councillor Chadder's point.
Yeah, it was just your question around the complaints policy consultation. That was specifically for the housing policy consultation, which was undertaken by housing colleagues separate to us. So I'm happy to take it away and get written feedback from you, but that didn't sit with me, that particular consultation.
I think we'll leave that to the separate discussion then.
But I think it needs to all come as one rounded piece.
But the corporate complaints policy, that's a draft here as it sits before us tonight.
Yeah.
What are the next stages on that? Did Cabinet, I haven't watched Cabinet.
Yeah, so Cabinet approved that. That is essentially an updated document that reflects some of the joint handling code that we have to adopt by, I think it's March 2026.
Yeah.
So it's mostly clarifying things like definitions. We have new timescales that we will need to adopt, shortening for stage 1, lengthening for stage 2. The plan is to mobilise that policy in line with the new system. So as you know, we're doing changing our CRM system. It makes sense to me to launch that policy and the new timescales and the new system at the same time, which will be in February 2025. We're doing it early.
Thank you.
So when it's formally now adopted, that policy, is it?
It's the wording of the recommendation, it's adopted in line with the rollout of the system. So we are still on old timescales and old policy at the moment. We will adopt it pending the change in system in February.
And how are you planning to socialise that within the council?
So that is sort of in preparation at the moment. We're going to have to do quite a hefty internal comms campaign, particularly for those officers that obviously handle complaints on a day-to-day basis, but also making everyone generally aware about that change, particularly for stage 1s, because it's a halving of the timescale. So we're going to have to do quite a lot of training and promotion of that to make people aware of that change.
So sorry, have you started the preparation?
Not yet. It's a little bit too early. We're prepping that rollout plan with colleagues in digital at the moment. But yes, yeah. Okay.
Councillor Paul?
Yeah, just to say 2 comments really. One, I do like the methodology. It's developed over a year now. I think you've arrived, Olivia. So we've got a really good methodology, which is really good. I think we've got to say that on the record because there have been some difficult meetings over here, and I think you've responded.
Sorry, Councillor Paul, could you speak up a little bit?
Speak up, okay. Be like me. as I said, well done. It's really good. The methodology is really refreshing to see. We've had some difficult meetings in this chamber over the year, and I think you responded to the challenges constructively. And I think it's really good. One, I think it's important to say that. And really just to come on to what the chief executive said, is really, I do welcome that. There's a lot going on. We've got the housing ombudsman, now we've got the register of social landlord. And in my mind, thinking, have we got different criteria in how we deal with complaints and how we as an organisation, and if there are priority and all that sort of thing. So obviously, at some point in the future, you come back and educate. So that's useful.
Yeah. I can give a really short answer to that, which is the regulator expects us to be following the ombudsman's rules when it comes to complaints specifically.
Okay.
There is obviously a lot more detail, which, as Abby said, we can talk about later, but short answer is the regulator expects us to be doing what the ombudsman tells us to do.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Can we have a flow chart in the next situation? There's a lot going on.
Yes, yeah.
And sometimes our questions are where we're not sure where the level is, but it's a really good report, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Chowdhury, please.
So on the plan improvement, you just explain a little bit more how you expect that to solve the problem, because a lot of residents, their issue is that they can't get through to someone. It's not necessarily that cases are being recorded and then sent to someone. It's that first stage and they're just not able to talk to someone. And also, when you do have the CRM in place, how you're going to ensure that the data quality will be good, because it could create all sorts of problems if it's not done properly.
Yeah, I'm happy to kick off, and then I'll bring Olivia in. So the current solution that we use for complaints and for members' inquiries is managed primarily on iCasework, which, without being too technical, it's a kind of off-the-shelf and not particularly helpful or fit-for-purpose product. It offers very limited utility around dashboards, performance reporting, trend analysis. The user experience, both for residents and for actually members who are primary users of that system, is very poor. And there's some very straightforward improvements that adopting an integrated solution through our CRM will give us, particularly around single sign-on, visibility of performance and dashboards. We expect residents to have much easier ability to track progress on complaints and a greater visibility of different statuses of the stages of complaints that residents are going through. And that will be infinitely helpful, just by itself. The added benefit of adopting a CRM solution is that is the same solution we use for all of our other methods of kind of universal resident contact. And it's a solution that is used in the call centre for call handling and kind of logging of many of our, not all of them, but many of our contact points. And we'll get much closer as a result of adopting that solution to a single view of the customer, that kind of single view of the resident experience, a single view of the data around sort of outcomes for residents. And it'll be much more easy as a result, strategically and operationally, to understand what are the driving factors for complaints and service delivery, what are the kind of key failure points in a resident journey.
It'll only tell me what the data tells me, don't know whether that's going to be accurate. And also, is there a recognition that a member's submission is also a signal of failure in communication, because the only reason they're showing up to is because they can't get through to someone with a standard system?
I think there's definitely some really important wider findings which we might want to share at future meetings around what we are learning through this project and other projects around what are the root causes of complaint. And some of the findings of this complaints report highlight that no doubt initial contact is one of the core reasons for complaint, but actually what we're finding more and more through our research and evidence is the failure to deliver a service end to end. That's the kind of the fundamental, core issue that many residents are now about, whether that's in relation to universal service provision for street services or experiences of repair service or otherwise. And we're starting, that's what the kind of insight plus data is starting to give us when we're triangulating not only sort of the rich insight from complaints, but also the knowledge we've got of service performance and other issues around this. So I think definitely a really interesting set of key lines of inquiry we'll continue to engage on. And I'm sure there'll be some really rich conversations we could have at future meetings here or in other places about that. Olivia, I don't know if you want to add anything.
I think just picking up on the bit around data quality, I think if my colleagues were here, they'd say they're probably sick of me talking to them about data quality, because that is culture as much as it is system. We're trying to build out error rates in the new system by the way that we're designing it. Putting it on Microsoft Dynamics helps because it makes our data better in terms of reporting, because it's no integrations and we can do it regularly and all the rest of it. But ultimately, a system is a system, and humans still have to put the right data into the system. And so I think a key part of that rollout is how we teach people to use it accurately and how we interrogate the data afterwards, and we're regular about our data cleansing and all those bits of pieces. But that's around working practice just as much as it is the system. I'm very cognizant of that as we roll it out, most definitely. Yeah.
Are you aware, sorry, are you aware also that a member of housing doesn't use the casework system?
I couldn't comment on that particularly.
It would be interesting to have a cultural to spread to councillors as well.
Gabby.
Sorry, apologies. I'm going to interject slightly there. We can't back check because we don't know, but if it is an issue, you can pick it up from the outside and I can flag it.
Okay. Councillor Crowther, please.
Two quick things. I welcome the policy and procedure for unreasonable and persistent complaints behaviour. Thank you. I think that's really helpful. Just one thing on it. You've mentioned vulnerabilities in the equalities implications section. Bearing in mind that sometimes the articulation of a complaint is because somebody is feeling vulnerable and people, how are we going to safeguard and make sure that people don't fall through the cracks? I know you're saying you're reviewing people every 3 months, but there is always a danger that somebody could make look for a better word at the moment, a legitimate complaint.
Yep.
And because of their behaviour and their presentation, we may rule them out. How are we going to safeguard that? And I think the second point kind of actually, that's it. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I'll provide an initial response, but Olivia, I'm sure you'll complete it for me if I don't get it right. I think without referring to specific terms in the policy itself, the overall intention of the inclusion of reference to vulnerability and the kind of inclusion, and this is needed in any sort of vexatious complaint policy, is the need to kind of treat every interaction on its own merits, irrespective of the fact that there may be significant patterns and trends of contact which trigger the application of the policy. I think the policy in as clear a way as it can, although I welcome your feedback on any opportunities to be clearer, allows for, residents who are subject to this policy to still have an honest, neutral and kind of easily accessible way to make contact with us about genuine new inquiries on new issues that may be emerging, irrespective of long-standing trends and long-standing issues. I think I'll bring Olivia in to just comment on the sort of specifics around how those channels will be managed, how we'll make that easily accessible and neutral, and how we'll ensure that if there is a vulnerability, particularly around potentially mental health or other, higher risk factor characteristics of the resident complaining, how and where we'll make sure that those aren't becoming exclusionary criteria for people to kind of access services if they're subject to the policy.
I think in the interest of time, I mean, I'm confident that you'll put the right safeguards in, but would it be in the council's corporate interest to actually have that explicitly stated in the policy, a section on safeguarding that actually says, we are mindful of this? Because I can see us then constantly being challenged and abused around that as well. And the other thing related to that is, in the other corporate draft strategy, you talk about those who are, for a better word, digitally excluded and can't access online complaint systems, being allowed by somebody, being helped by the call centre to take down a complaint. Is there potential for conflict of interest there?
That is a good question. I would hope I would hope the Officer Code of Conduct, and it would be referred to a neutral party. So, for example, if it was about one member of staff, I would expect the team manager or another team manager within the contact centre to be picking that. I would never expect the person who the complaint is about to be dealing with that complaint within the contact centre.
But in the call centre,
I see that. Yeah, if they're the one that picks up the call, it's a good question. I think it's something we're mindful of. I don't have a specific procedure that I suppose I can quote to you around it, but I would.
Something you could look into.
Yeah.
Hi, so I obviously this conversation right now is incredibly important, but I wanted to go back to something that you said earlier about the fact that obviously more people are reporting now, and that's affecting the stats on maladministration. But I'm just wondering, obviously these complaints are coming in because there's been existing disrepair, etc. 23% of stage 1 complaints are of disrepair in council housing. Obviously the report's coming out today not good enough, right? So I'm just wondering about what you would say strategically about how prepared we are for people. Obviously, you're saying wide levels of comms and allowing people to be acquainted with the system to be able to get the support they need. But what's the preparation in place, would you say, that we have to be able to fulfill the needs of residents once these complaints are made? Given that you said that there has been a backlog, people have not had their issues dealt with on a timescale that is at all acceptable. So what's the ongoing solution that the council have at the moment as opposed to this, I guess?
So yeah, I'll pick that up first. I think there's a number of things. I mean, the kind of overall response to significant service challenges that the regulator has identified, absolutely a sort of corporate whole council response. It's one of the first things I'd want to say. I'm sure Abby will come in on this point. And you know, a comprehensive action plan is being developed, etc. All of the things that you would expect the council to be doing will be happening, and I'm sure that will be subject to a meaningful conversation in this place, in this committee, once the agenda allows for it. In relation to complaints handling, you'll see from some of the performance graphs that we've shared on the presentation, particularly under I think it's figure 8, it shows the directorate by directorate breakdown of complaints performance and the speed within which we are responding to complaints. Kind of significant performance dip at the end of the year. It's been a really significant performance increase in terms of the speed with which we are responding to complaints. And that, just want to offer this as a kind of case study of some of the improvements that we're starting to see. That is the result of some excellent joint working across the corporate complaints team and the housing resident contact team, which has resulted in some really, really positive joint sharing of practice, sharing of resources across different parts of the system that are involved in complaints, early resolution processes being put in place between the housing resident contact team and the actual service delivery teams that are sat behind that team. And that's an improving trend. And it's just one of many, many things that will be taking place corporately to address the sort of user experience, but also the fundamental service challenges that the service faces. The ultimate answer to provide, you know, resolving this kind of significant increase in volume around complaints and particularly sort of challenges around resident experience. And when we offer context, we're not offering that as excuse. It's really just about the sort of reason for changes here is to get things right first time. That's the fundamental metric of success for this area of the council's business. And that is there are significant things that are occurring and are going to occur within the service to make that journey much more prominent and accelerated in the near future. But they rely upon things like you know, very simple to access processes for residents, high quality first points of contact once residents are contacting us around repairs primarily, but other core issues, upskilling repairs operatives to ensure they can fix jobs at the right time in the right way, having professional, you know, kind of whole family, whole person minded approaches to providing services. So this is one small kind of piece of the picture when it comes to the entire service improvement journey that the service is absolutely on. And I'm sure Abby's hand went up. I'm not sure, Abby, if I've covered your points, if you want to come in on anything.
You want to come?
Yeah, I was just going to give a really short response, if that's okay, because the reality is most of the disrepair complaints and people continue to complain is because we haven't delivered the services that we need to. So the only answer is we need to get better and we need to deliver the services that we need to and better services to residents. That's the only way we're going to resolve it. And I'll shy away from it to talk.
Thank you, Abby.
Response in short.
I've got a question which maybe you can respond to, Abby. It's about the Ombudsman Annual Review Letter. Page 84 of the pack. Paragraph. Furthermore, I'm disappointed that for the 4th consecutive year, I must raise concerns about your council's response to our investigation inquiries. We've received late responses in 11 of the 23 requests we made during the year. In a significant proportion of these, we did not receive requests for extensions to deadline, which meant my staff spent time chasing responses. In a number of cases, we received incomplete responses or information that we already had received and had not requested. Concerningly, in 4 cases, we had to remind the council of our powers to issue a witness summons in order to receive the information we requested. So how is the role of the ombudsman being? How do officers understand the role of the ombudsman, and to stop this for the fourth year that a letter comes to you stating that it's the fourth time reporting? So obviously people don't understand the role of the ombudsman and the need to address their queries in a prompt, complete and useful way, in the fact that they're sending incorrect information. So how is that being relayed and disseminated so that staff understand what the ombudsman does, and when they request information, how they need to respond?
I don't think there's a straightforward answer. That's the reality of it. I think it's something that we still need to deliver and improve on. And when engaging with the ombudsman, it's just a piece of the work we need to do in the organisation. I think it's more symptomatic of a number of things, as you can see in the wider complaints report, which the team are leading on in terms of helping us to improve, including not just housing ombudsman, but social care ombudsman, and just kind of reiterating the importance. So I've been really shirty, but I do not expect another letter on the 31st of March 2025. And the test will be whether the work that we're trying to do collectively across the organisation is effective or not.
Okay, thank you. Final comment from Councillor Chowdhury, please.
So, going back to my previous point, clarification and a question. There's freedom of information press submitted in July 23 last year. Submissions on iCasework of all councillors, cabinet member housing, had only recorded 9 of the which I know is not an accurate reflection of the amount of housing casework actually does. Back to his point, which to me does seem like the most important aspect to solve the cabinet best system place with. If even the cabinet member for housing is not going to be huge, and it also suggests that perhaps the data you have is an underestimate, or because you might not be recording all of these things that's being sent by direct email. But do you have a plan for when people don't use the new system about also capturing the data from other submissions, which may also reflect the satisfaction from our residents?
Yeah, I think there's multifaceted reasons for the varying numbers of recorded casework instances on the system, and I won't list them all, but some cases will relate to non-use of the system and use of alternative channels like emails or other forms of contact. In some cases, I say this with no relish, but it may reflect a lack of casework being delivered. I'm not going to comment, and I think it'd be wrong for me to comment on that particular individual case, because I think that is a particular member of cabinet, it's a particular person with their own set of casework, and there's no way to kind of verify which of those two scenarios we're talking about. Although I think it's fair to say that it is likely around a usage of system issue rather than another issue. Some of it relates to the actual user experience of the system. The rest of it absolutely relates to kind of culture and expectation and procedure. And one of the things that will be delivered quite quickly on the back of agreeing the new complaints policy is an implementation of a very clear set of guidelines about how non-system contacts we manage when it relates to members' inquiries, how off-system requests for information, that should be characterised as a member inquiry, but might be characterised as alternative contact relating to a cabinet portfolio, for example, or a scenario like that. Real clarity and real consistency within the sort of internal complaints and members' inquiries team around how that was handled. And, in addition to that, training and kind of culture change program that will be associated with the program will no doubt have a positive impact on making really clear the sort of very, very, I would say important principles around consistency of use of system, consistency of use of process, and respect for the sort of degree of council kind of governance around this to take place. I'm offering that as a general observation, as a set of enabling criteria for the entirety of the system. Just make it clear, I'm not making that as an observation about any particular individual member. And I think it'd be unfair for me for that conclusion to be drawn in relation to my response, if that's okay. The final point I'll raise is the other side of this is making sure we get the user experience right to the system. We think there are some fair and legitimate criticisms that can be offered around the current user experience of iCasework, and I won't go into too much detail around that. I think it's fair to say it's a complex set of factors we need to get right to kind of move that on.
Okay, thank you, James. We're going to move on now. This report is for noting to members present in the room. Now, I see by a show of hands, is the report noted? Adam?
I note it reluctantly.
Okay. It's still noted. Okay. Item 7, Performance Development Scheme Appraisals, update October 2020. I'd like to thank the Chief Executive for attending tonight and to also welcome Gordon McFarlane, Director of HR, who's recently joined the council. I will take this report as read and will allocate 10 minutes for this item. Are there any questions for Gordon? Tada, please.
So two quick questions. When you've, bearing in mind that we've got the equality pay duty, also kind of, to put into place as well. Can you also collect data about protected characteristics and performance appraisals as well? So we can identify if there's any trends or any issues. So that maybe that's just something to take away. And the other issue relates to AC 218, which is the paper you provided, Gordon, to us. Tell Jane's performance and everything. Now, forgive me, but that's a really worrying paper in terms of some of the indicators that it's pointing to around toxic management. And I just wondered what our corporate plans were, because it'd be fantastic if that paper could come back in a year's time and those percentages of people happy to report and disclose is even a fraction down. I think that would show progress. What do we need to do to achieve that? What resources do you need to make that happen?
Second point first, and then ask my colleague Kath, perhaps to just comment on the first point. I mean, I'm happy to go into a bit of detail around the Tell Jane briefing notes. I think you wanted to take that under the risk register. But you're absolutely right. This is systemic as well as cultural, and part of that is around good supervision, relationships between members of staff and their manager, culminating in a quality appraisal. It's about the relationship. This report is really about the basics, getting the basics right. So I wonder if I could build on that when I get to the generated stuff. And I also agree that we need to come back and implement better.
Kath, did you?
Hi, Catherine Anderson, in organisational development. And if I understand your question correctly, you were asking about completion rates and protected characteristics.
Yes.
It's not something currently that we collect, but we can. As you're probably aware that our rates of knowledge on protected characteristics, we still need to work on getting those rates up. So the data that we can collect is as good as the data that we've got. But it's certainly something we can look into. It's not something we do at the moment. We have been focusing on getting completions, getting managers to really increase the feedback that they're giving and realise how important those conversations are. And something else that's prompted my thoughts really is it would be useful to perhaps see if there's any difference in ratings as well with protected characteristics. So that's something I can take away.
Thank you. Thank you. Abby, did you want to come in?
Oh, no, I think Councillor Paul.
Thank you. I've got a question on toxic management, but I deal with it under the risk register section. So I've got two questions. Page 143, annual performance review. What is the standard recompletion of performance review?
What do you mean by course?
So, you know, we've got a performance framework. What is the level you're expecting of completed performance review?
Is there a target? So are you saying it's like 100% or you're acceptable 90%? What is it? Because some of them are way low, 50%.
Standard.
Marketing is at 45%. So where's the benchmark? Are you saying that you're expecting 90% is a turnout or 70%? So where would you judge that to be?
I don't actually have those figures. Do you have them?
I'll give you a response. I think we have to probably face this. That's part of changing the culture. Ultimately, it has to be 100%. It's everybody's right to have good quality supervision and appraisal in whatever form that takes. And there is a lane I think we put in towards the end.
Yeah, that's
revamping the system to make sure that it's meaningful, it's helpful, it's not a tick box exercise. So it's 100%.
Okay, so supplementary. So we've got managers in this organisation who part of the performance agreement is to manage and develop their staff and do their job, and they're not doing their job. Are you still paying those managers who don't complete the performance reviews of their staff? Because I've never worked in an organisation where I've not been expected to complete my staff appraisal. If I don't do it, I don't get paid.
Could you like me to take that? For senior managers, so semi graded managers, it is a requirement, it is a requirement for them to complete all performance processes. So that includes probation and the PDS process, the appraisal process. And their annual increment is withheld if that doesn't happen.
Okay.
I think, I think Councillor Paul wants to know, what is the sanction? So yes, for senior managers, they don't get the increment, but for people below that, there's a lot of managers below that. What's the sanction if they don't do what they're meant to do as part of their role as a manager?
We need to rely on their managers to make sure that they are performance managers.
Yes.
And that's what we need to really work on.
But what is the sanction though?
Sanction.
I mean, there isn't a sanction in terms of pay.
No, I'm not thinking about pay. I'm thinking in terms of a manager having responsibility for appraisals. If they don't do that, what is the sanction for that manager? You said their manager is meant to deal with it. What is the process?
So that would be a performance management sanction. So
Okay.
Capability provision.
All right.
Okay. So at the moment, if you look at the council wide, so 22% of managers are on capability right now. Is that correct?
I don't have those stats in front of me.
You can see.
Sorry, Councillor Paul, let Gordon respond. Could you just explain that?
Okay.
How he's come to that conclusion for 22%?
Absolutely.
Yes, please.
And I think this is about being clear about our expectations, changing culture, holding people to account. You could argue that if the manager isn't undertaking appraisals, there isn't managing sickness absence, managing their budget. Government properties, in other words, look at it in the red.
Councillor Paul, let him just respond, please.
Yeah.
Carry on, Gordon.
Sorry, Gordon.
Sorry, I
interrupted you, Gordon.
Yes.
All right.
Tell me to shut up, Gordon. Sorry. No, Gordon, thank you for that. And can I say in the note which you're going to write to the committee on, include what's the completion rate and the process towards that? I'll be looking for a timeline and I'll be looking for some hard metrics. I get the words you say about culture, I'm looking for facts on the ground, to be honest, right? And also I'm looking for a section in the report on sanctions. Because if I just follow the logic of what was said, if I don't do a performance brief, I manage to perform it well. If we don't do it, we get away with it, right? You create a culture of non-compliance. That's what I heard. But my final point is, can you just tell me why marketing is so low and out of variance?
I mean,
reasonably sure that there is an issue there with significant staff turnover, and that therefore that has skewed the figures. It's also a very small department. I'm not saying that justifies the figure, but I think those are the two factors affect that. But I agree with you. It is clearly the outlier in terms of performance.
If I can for you, Chair, I'm going to just come back to you and throw the report back. It says in the report of eligible staff excluding exemptions, it doesn't say because of turnover. So can I just ask in the report, Gordon, when you reply back to can you give a detailed breakdown of what's going on in marketing? Please include the numbers, please include why, please remove the people's names, and so you can be as open and honest. Because it's completely out of kilter and there's something going on there. The figures are not highlighting what it is. Thank you, Chair.
Olsen, please.
Hello. So I have a couple of questions on this. I think one thing is related to what Councillor Paul said, where it seriously doesn't make sense that this many people don't complete their performance appraisals without any sanctions or without anything. And I think when we were speaking about housing just now, I don't know if there's any correlation between people not completing their performance appraisals and then the service level having a big but when I look at the performing well of someone who's complete, I assume this 2024, that the performance ratings is based on the people who have completed their performance reviews. And even that, I find it really bizarre. Normally it's a normal distribution where, you know, you've got a top, you know, one rated 10%, but on some of these is 50%, 55%. Are the performance targets for these people not realistic? Are they just, you know, blanket? How are they made so that some people, more than half of the population of that team is excelling in that team, and then you've still got a lot of service issues?
Gordon, then Abby, please.
Just briefly, performance targets will relate to the work that we're doing, so they're likely to be realistic. I think part of it is the organization and competence and confidence of managers, not just to default to the highest rating, for example, because that's good, but to have the honest conversations, and those conversations, appraisals shouldn't be a surprise. There should be a build up through the year, so that people expect to, you know, there's no surprise as to where they land in their appraisal, if you like. I think there's something about the leadership management that we undertake as one of our actions of the workforce strategy. This is about doing the basics well.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know whether for those people who are doing it, it's like a tick box exercise where they're going to make their targets just so that they've done it, and then they're making it as easy enough so that they can excel in it. Especially when the borough is currently under so much scrutiny. I don't know where there's so many people excelling in some of these service areas, and it just kind of baffles me a little bit.
Abby, do you want to come in and respond?
Yeah, yes, please. So I'm going to respond to it in two different ways. I think there are some areas of our services that are actually doing well. I know that there are some poorer areas, and there are some services that are doing well, and it would be remiss of me to take that away from those services.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, I think if you remember, and I don't know if it's come here, but there was do the LGA peer review. There was a glaring omission that the organisation just didn't have, which is a workforce strategy.
Mm.
So the expectation of employees, managers, as to what they're even trying to do or aim at didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
That was launched in May. And now the next phase of that, which Gordon, and I'm really grateful that Gordon is here permanently with us, is to review our appraisal system. Because there's a difference between meaningful engaged appraisals, like you say, and just ticking the boxes because you want to get them done. And there's a massive piece of work for us to do in terms of learning development of managers at all levels. I'm kind of hoping that you will answer your toxic management question whilst I'm here, Councillor Paul, because I think it's important and I want to hear it. Because there are cultural issues within the organisation, we know that. It came out in the LJ peer review, it's come out from our union, we cannot ignore that. But there's also a gap in terms of us enabling and developing players of management to do the best they need to do. But, and hence why it just, and in line with where we say we're going with our workforce strategy.
Okay, are you happy, Councillor Paul?
Yeah, just Abby set the scrutiny process a challenge of being engaged in the forthcoming work, the social housing thing. And one of the things, just looking, was caused some come on to me. If you look at housing, 70% of the people have performed well, but the service hasn't. Caveat, not all that is housing people, there are planners and that and all sorts. So perhaps in the work plan coming forward, can we look at the appraisal system in housing?
It's all going to be in and around.
Lovely, thank you.
Here in terms of the expectations, in terms of performance, and people's adherence to them. And it goes back to probably your question around toxic management and expectations at that level. But please do ask it whilst I'm here, because I want to hear it.
Councillor Paul, do you
be able to answer it?
No,
Sorry, just because
if she has to leave. So
yeah, my question to toxic management is I hear on the reading the peer review about the workshops and the culture change and all that sort of thing. I have quite a serious report to say we've got toxic managers in the organisation. My question to personal people: how many toxic managers have we got? how many have we exited in the past year and what we're doing to get them out? Because I feel very uncomfortable that staff, I suspect only a small number of staff are actually reporting, but below that pyramid, there are a lot more. So my question is, forget the workshops, where are the sanctions? And I read in here in the performance, some glowing words about the performance management system, anything about tackling underperforming and toxic management. And basically what I'm saying, I don't see a line of sight for all those issues. I know there's an issue, but in the papers I've seen here, there's no line of sight, which means my question is, are you tackling the toxic managers? And where's the proof that you are doing that beyond just workshops?
Gordon.
I have an initial go at that. I think toxic management is an interesting phrase.
It's called bullying in other retail words.
Subjective phrase.
What it is.
Member of staff which is how they feel, and we wouldn't doubt how they feel.
Sorry, Gordon, you're going to have to try and
Speak louder. Out. Out.
Competition.
Is that they're revving the engine?
So I think in any organisation, there are multiple ways in which people raise concerns. Some will do it directly with their lane manager, some will jump to the grandparent manager, and a small percentage will whistleblow. And in this case, because we have an external service, an independent service, starting to build a picture, very early days, of the number of people who feel that they need to go to an external service, which is, anonymous. I don't know, because tell Jamie it's a case by case, set of details, nor should they. How people have got to those conclusions around toxic management. I think I could go back to perhaps a version of Abby's point around we have lots of really good managers. We've got hundreds of managers in the organisation, given the management responsibility. We have a lot who are very good, very diligent, form great relationships, are able to deal with stuff at the most possible level. And inevitably for a large organisation, we have other managers, and I can't number them in the way that you're asking the question, who are less good. And this is sometimes where we get the problems. What we try and do, though, and we do this through our casework as well, is monitor to see if there are problem service areas, for want of a better description.
Like exit interviews. Do you monitor exit?
That's a measure as well.
Can I
Let Abby come in, please, and then final question.
that?
Yes.
There was a piece of work that was started with the unions, with Julie and the corporate team, that we're going to begin to continue to pick up now that we've got through a lot of the other things that were happening. So one of the things that was raised with the unions was around, we can call it toxic cultures, challenging behaviours, whatever we would like to call it. It's been named a few different things. What we've agreed is a joint piece of work between the corporate team and the unions to unearth some of this stuff, because not all of it is going to come up in Tell Jane. We already knew that the disclosures quite early on in Tell Jane were not forthcoming. And one of the approaches that Julie and I took with the unions is, the complaints and what is going on. We need to create a safer space for people to come forward. And that's just the reality of where we are as an organisation. And we need to do that in what's the word I'm looking for? Forgive me.
Function.
Together.
Yeah.
That's not the word I'm looking for. There you go. In partnership with our unions and our senior leaders. So the senior leaders and I committed to the unions to do that bit of work. And that's a bit that we're fleshing out. We may not find everybody. I think we need to be realistic, but the big bit for us, and my concern as a head of paid service, is making sure that there are spaces safe enough for people to talk. We can only deal with what people are willing to let us know. And part of that is around us making it a safe enough culture for people to unearth and come forward and not feel like they will be punished for challenging on behaviours that are just not okay.
Sorry, Abby. So just in terms of that, will you be dealing with staff that have been identified as problem managers as such, who are bullied?
It's managing them, we have to.
Yes, because
I say loosely dealing with, because we need to also remember that there are processes.
Yes.
Taking people.
But the intention would be.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
It's that bit.
yes, it's a personnel matter, so it's not as,
Yeah.
but
Know what we
intention.
We don't know what we don't know, and that's the bit we need to resolve quite quickly. And some of that is about people feeling safe enough to disclose. And I think that's what you're getting from Tell Jane.
Okay, final question, councillor.
I just want to say, I really appreciate what you just said. It goes to the heart of what I wanted to ask, but I think it's an understatement to say that, I guess, there's not a safe space. Like 90% of it's to tell explicitly wanted to stay anonymous. That's not just a culture point, it's that people, it's not just a few problem managers across the organization. People feel as such, even though there's been an introduction of a system that is supposed to supposedly give this accountability and allow people to make complaints about problem behavior. 90% of complainants, who are a very small set of the people who didn't even feel confident enough to use that complaint system, they didn't feel safe enough to have their name identified. So it's likely that you probably won't find everyone, because I'm just curious about what comes first. Is it that the culture of the organisation changes enough that people feel willing to come forward? How is it that you expect to identify people? I think it's that they will be penalised for coming forward about public problem behaviour from your managers. I just wonder how that would work.
We did have this discussion because solution in terms of where we need to get to. I think the first stage for us is collectively owning it as an organisation and making it safe. We're not going to get to the crux where I can say in 3 years' time our organisational culture is going to be perfect and everyone is going to come out. I need people to talk to us now. We're going on the journey with the unions as we are. A lot of our staff trust their union reps, and we've had to rebuild our relationship with our unions in the last year or so to get us to the point where we're like, we're going this together. I can't tell you what the impact of it is until we begin to unearth it, but it is that kind of physical demonstration to people that we're taking it seriously. We're also backing up against a lot of organisational history that probably outlives a lot of us. But that rebuilding our relationship with our unions, because our staff are speaking to their unions. We need to, they're not talking to anyone, they're speaking to the unions, and the unions need to trust us that we do on our side.
Okay, thank you, Abby. We're going to close this item now because we've run over. So the report is for noting to members present in the room. I see by a show of hands is the report noted. Thank you. Thank you, Abby, for attending tonight and giving your feedback, and we look forward to much further things to come. We're now going to move on to item 8, update on mandatory training. I will take the report ahead and will allocate 5 minutes for this item. Are there any questions? Councillor Chowdhury.
Yes, so it kind of touches upon the culture issue again. In section 4, you've got mandatory learning. So 2 statistics that are completely meaningless. But how many people took 16 courses they had in 2022 versus a totally different statistic who took 5 courses, which tells you nothing really. Unless you have the number of people who took 5 courses in 2022, these are totally meaningless statistics, which only paint an image of improvement, but doesn't actually tell you any real improvement whatsoever. Regardless of that, the fact that 56% of people aren't in mandatory training doesn't provide a lot of confidence that people are going to use these new CRM systems or these other new systems that we're inputting in to improve the resident experience. And probably a lot of those people are probably sanctioning residents for missing of payments, etc. They're actually not doing their own mandatory training. What is being done to move that number of people and also have a like-for-like figure to compare it to 2022, because these are meaningless statistics.
I'll just, if it's okay, Chair, just give a little bit of the history of this and then bring Gordon in. So I don't agree that the figures are statistically meaningless. They're the figures that are available because what happened between those 2 dates is we moved from the system.
I understand what's happening. Except that one is measuring 22. One is measuring 16 versus 5 courses. So a real comparison with 5 versus 5, not doesn't matter what's in the content of those.
Sorry, councillor Chowdhury, let Conrad finish, please.
One of the reasons the completion rate was thought to be very poor, and it's still not good, is because there were far too many courses, some of which didn't need to be mandatory. And so by reducing it to a much smaller number of courses that needed to be completed, the statistics do show, so I don't think the statistics are meaningless, that the completion rate has improved. Improved from a very poor number to a still poor number, but I'm just making the point that I think
They were very intelligent.
it's unreasonable to say that, you know, this is some sort of improper presentation of the.
They were very
It tells a story of improvement, but not nearly at a quick enough rate.
Sorry, councillor Chowdhury, sorry, I think the point that you're making and Conrad is saying, the number of courses has decreased, so it's not possible at September 24 to do a comparison like for like to say 16 courses per year. I think maybe up to what point were there 16 courses still being required?
I would need to look at the exact date. I mean, it's somewhere between those two dates. It was a conscious decision. There are too many courses.
Yes.
Staff looking at them can tell that some of these don't need to be mandatory, so they're not doing them. So we will reduce it to a much smaller number in order to take that excuse away. It has been somewhat successful, but not nearly successful enough.
Okay. Any further points, councillor Chowdhury?
You accept a more accurate comparison would be comparing the first 5 courses that staff have taken versus the 5 courses they've taken now. Rather, because if you introduce a 6th course, for example, you don't know that the completion rate would be better. It could be decreasing as the number of courses are introduced.
Okay, Kath, you wanted to comment, please.
Sorry, I was just going to say that so the courses are different. So even if we took the original 5 and compared with 5 now, they're not the same.
So basically the comparison is difficult to do because you're not going to be able to compare like for like. But what you want to show is an increase in the rate of completion, which has happened by reducing it from 16 to 5.
Yeah.
It is, it's a higher number, even if you take it. Anyway, we're not going to argue. No, I think we've understood the point. I think, Kath, what would be helpful is for you to give us an update on how you're progressing. I think that's the.
We're going to get 43.9 to a much higher number.
Yes.
We can all agree, despite our other disagreements on statistics, we can all agree that 43.9% is not nearly high enough.
So Gordon, Kath, can you look at what is the process, what is the plan of action to increase the completion rate?
The next steps.
Would you like me to explain?
Yes.
Very briefly, one of the things that we've done is arrange some spotlights on particular courses. So, for example, equality and diversity. Everybody in the organisation who had access to IT were sent a calendar invitation. So please use this hour to do this particular course. And that did increase the numbers. This hasn't given us 100%. But it worked to a degree and we're going to continue doing those spotlights on particular.
So sorry, Kath, how do you deal with the operatives who don't generally have access to IT? What's the process for that?
They have a different set of mandatory learning.
Okay.
So it's an area they don't have access.
So this is only to staff that are basically office-based staff. Okay, thanks.
The other thing that we've done is we've improved the reporting function so that managers can see how people in their teams are getting on and chase that. So that's improved. We have struggled over the years to get Fusion to send reminders. But we've been working, we've got Redwood, I don't know if you've heard of that, but Redwood's coming in, it's part of Fusion, it's an improvement in Fusion. And we're really hoping that will give us the facility to remind people, you haven't completed this one yet, please do it.
And sorry, Kath, what is the reporting process in terms of, is this reported to CMT? How are people informed about the completion rates?
Yes, it is. It's reported to CMT.
All right.
A very quick one.
Yes.
If I'm a manager and I've got access to Fusion, does it force me to do my performance appraisal for my staff? And does it force me to check that my staff have mandatory courses? Does the system do that?
No, not currently, no. But we're hoping with this addition to Fusion that we can get the system to do that.
It's not a stop-go system.
Gordon?
I think the information is there, so it's available. It's a management tool to use. There is still an expectation on managers to do that. I think what Kath is talking about is creating prompts and reminders, so it is technically X. It's not, I don't think it ever would be a part of the system where it's kind of stop go, it's a mandatory, for example.
So just so I would have thought, if I'm a manager with 23 staff and I've got a boss, let's say Conrad's my boss, then I should be able to go into the system, press a button, and it should be able to tell me who's done the manager training and who's yet to do a performance appraisal. And then you say Conrad's my senior boss, he should be able to click a button and see, has Terry done what he should have done? Surely in the modern day of performance systems and ERP systems, that is what we should be doing, surely. Otherwise, it's going back to paper and pen.
Yeah, we use the system and the information is in the system and available. I think that with respect, I think the point you made before was slightly different, or I heard it slightly differently in terms of people being forced to. So this is why I said it's we can use the information and systems and management tool in the way that you've just described.
Yeah.
Have the conversations.
Yeah. Chuck, as a recommend, could you investigate to see whether the system could be using that interrogator? Because it'd make your life a lot easier, Gordon. And a year from now, we won't be asking the same question, because I assume next year we'll be back here. The performance, whatever figure is the corporate figure, which we've got to decide, it won't be at the level. I suspect mandatory training will not be 100%. And I'm very concerned about cyber security, for example. Can we just take it away, whether Redwood can do it and whatever? Very simple, click decision tree. I think that might be the way forward. It's up to you to work it out.
Keep looking at how the system can help us.
Yeah.
Okay, any final questions so we can move on? Okay. Thank you, Gordon and Kath. This report is for noting to members present in the, may I see by a show of hands, is the report? Thank you. Okay, item 9, quarterly internal audit update. I will take this report as read and allocate 20 minutes for its consideration. There are 2 schools limited assurance reports to consider during this time. Are there any questions for the report author, Nicole Vivier, and Director of Education and Inclusion, Annabelle Bates?
Thank you. Question perhaps to you, Annabelle. What training do you provide to schools with regards to governance and finance?
So there are a number of different types of training, much of which is delivered through partners, through MPW and other providers. The governing body sets the training schedule for the year, which we look at as part of our ongoing conversation for maintained schools with MPW, provide the majority of government services and maintained schools. And that does include financial oversight as pertains to the governance code. So the training is readily available. Some of the challenges, and I can go on to talk about the detail of these 2 schools if it's helpful. Some of the challenges has raised questions around both full completion and attendance of training of all governors, and whether there is ongoing training or whether it's be seen as one-off training by governing bodies. And also we've been looking at the training of the members of staff in schools who are responsible for reporting to governors on financial issues.
Yeah, because Chair, that was the second point was, yes, that's governor training, and I am a governor of a school. I'm fully aware training, and it's right, you're dealing with volunteers. But more importantly, it's a school staff who are the bedrock. And looking through here, it seemed the school staff didn't quite know what the procedures were. So what is your education's point of view? How do you monitor the situation in schools? What is it you do to ensure that school staff are on point and following process, rather than letting schools fail and have a report like that?
And I'd say, I think it's absolutely fair to say that there was a failure on the part of school staff in both of these schools. I will say there's a slight difference, and I can touch on some of that, but just broadly first, the responsibility of the quality training for school staff sits with the head teacher, which of course is signed off by the governing body. We have, with these 2 schools, we've spent some time with both head teachers, one of whom is a very new head teacher, she's an acting head teacher, and is new to role, and looked at the quality of her performance management to ensure that she understands the full, because it's within the national guidance for head teacher standards. This is a requirement. We also have worked with our colleagues in the finance team and the in the local authority to set up regular meetings with business managers, school business managers, because they're often the ones that oversee the practicalities of training for all school staff. And that's something that's been implemented over the course of the past year with new members of the finance team. That's having, I think, some considerable impact on the quality of training. And we've also set up a subgroup of the Education Partnership Board with head teachers and business managers to look at not just training, actually some other contractual issues. Unfortunately, some of that wasn't in place before these audits took place, but the audits have certainly helped to inform the importance of the quality of training.
Thank you, Anton. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions? So just quickly, things that were highlighted in the report, have they been, are they in a different place now? So they have purchase orders in place, they have a contract register? Okay.
They have an action plan we're working with them.
And how are they progressing on the action plan?
All progressing rapidly, as you can imagine. They've taken this very seriously. Thank you. Sure.
Have you used this as a learning exercise with the other schools who are there by the grace of God, haven't had their financial?
Yes, we have, and I've been working with colleagues in the audit.
Great, thank you.
To plan ahead.
We use that learning and everybody knows.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Nicole, did you have any comments? Annabelle, any further questions? Okay. All right, this report is for noting to members present in the room. May I see by show of hands is the report noted? Thank you. Item 10, quarterly forward progress report. Take the report as read and allocate 5 minutes for its consideration. Are there any questions for Nick, please?
Yeah, Chair, for you.
Okay.
First of all, done on the 15 properties you found, but obviously in doing the checks, have you gone back to housing and amended and improved their systems? And what things have you done upstream to stop this happening in the first place? Like, there's quite a few different things you're finding, and I'm thinking, a system failure, a people failure, or is it both?
In relation to the subletting figure, that's difficult because that's not an internal matter in terms of that. We'll obviously, things we do is obviously we will publicise results, which is hopefully a deterrent. So try to do that. But ultimately, I don't think there's much control over those. Some of the properties and applications in relation to the temporary accommodation project, we've certainly been talking to our housing colleagues and feeding in where we've found problems that, things that they might be able to do differently.
Okay, so there's a feedback loop there.
Yeah, certainly that with the temporary accommodation project. Yeah, when they've been found, if there's been anything that we've found that potentially could be done better, we feed that in and we're monitoring that and we're looking at all of the cases as it's still ongoing. We've not kind of provided.
And just a supplementary feature.
Yes.
There seems to be a lot of temporary accommodation people who shouldn't be on a temporary accommodation list, right? In that sample. And I look at our temporary accommodation figures and they're quite high. And I wondered, is there a correlation?
Well, in relation to not being on the list, I mean, what we've tried to do is use data to obviously there's a lot of properties, so we try to use data to see where we can potentially find people that maybe no longer need to be in temporary accommodation. In relation to the numbers that we've found to date, I don't necessarily think they're.
Sorry, if I'm misreading it, there was a pilot you did on temporary accommodation.
Councillor Paul, can you just say what is that? 205?
Sorry, it's 1.11. You've got 534 cases. Okay, then you say lower down, 111 remain under investigation, and 381 have been closed with no further action.
Okay, so some context with that. The original data sample that we had was sort of near 6,000. So that's what we've looked at. We've used kind of our own sort of intelligence to narrow that down. So the 534 cases we've looked at, they're the ones that we've been able to terminate, and the ones we've passed to housing to potentially look at termination. In relation to the 111, that's mainly because the initial work and the results we've got has been as the result of desktop investigation. So the 111 now are in a phase of doing sort of physical audits. So that the 111, that doesn't mean that they're going to convert into
True.
shouldn't be there. So
The fact that under investigation means they're not clean cases, right?
I'm sorry.
Sort of clean, straight cases. It's something there which is raising alarm bells, which you go in to do checks, right?
There's a marker, but that's an intelligent marker, which, may or may not mean that. So I need to stress that they might not be, but it's just because the results published here are purely based on what we've been able to do desktop. And the next stage of the project is doing those visits. So the next time we come, those numbers will vary and we'll be able to say, so I'd imagine with the 111, we'll say those 111 have had visits, and as a result, we now have X and Y in relation to the results. But this is me trying to report as we're kind of going along, opposed to being at the end of the project.
Okay, thank you.
Coulson?
My question is that, so, you've got 1.9, it says you've started a project to tackle this problem, and temporary accommodation is one of the biggest overspends in this borough. Are you able to shed some light on what this project is? What are you doing? I didn't, to be honest, I don't understand the sentence properly, and it might just be me, but I just thought if you could shed some light into what activities are being done, because this will affect the overspends in this one.
Okay, so obviously in relation to what we're looking at is it's trying to identify if there are people that are in temporary accommodation that perhaps no longer need it or that might be misusing it, in the same way that we do with our sort of normal cases that we investigate for social housing properties. So an example of that where we're looking at days matching, and when I think one of the things that is mentioned now, it says the matches include, for example, where the tenant has no financial link at the property. So obviously what we might look at is if someone's been in a property and has been there over 6 months and there's no financial link at the property, that might be something that we would look at. That doesn't insinuate any wrongdoing, but it's just a way that we will filter down which ones we look at and which ones we might not.
And do you get like some sort of inspiration of what you should be doing you've got these in this area to catch as many people as possible, if that is the case? Or if it is just that this borough has just got a really big temporary accommodation problem?
I mean, the work that we do is intelligence based when we do the data matching. So we're looking at previous trends and we're looking at the results we have via subletting in relation to our overall position in temporary accommodation. That's probably not for me to comment on, but certainly our work is.
I can come in there.
I can add a little bit to that. I mean, it is true, Newham has more people in temporary accommodation than any other, and the causes for that are not entirely understood. I think it's important to stress, that just as in, sort of regular social housing, we do find a number of cases, regrettably, of fraud, for example, unlawful subletting. It frankly just reflects the economic reality that property prices and rents being as they are. The economic incentive to commit such fraud is actually quite high. So I'm not surprised at that we have found cases where that is happening. I think with more of the work concluded, obviously Nick's presented here a sort of progress report where we are at a point in time. We'll have a better idea as to the total. I've certainly frequently heard suggestions that in social housing, for example, unlawful subletting, this is not a Newham thing, it's a London thing and wider, is perhaps easily 10%. Very hard, of course, to prove it because you don't know each of those individual cases. So arguably, even if all of the 100 and odd cases still under investigation were proven to have some issue with them, given a total caseload of 6,000, that wouldn't necessarily be surprising. It is just, unfortunately, the economic reality. People can make quite a lot of money out of this.
Thank you.
Any further questions for councillor Chowdhury? Okay. All right. This recommendations are for noting to members present in the room. May I see by a show of hands is the report noted? Thank you. Item 11, quarterly update on risk management and risk register. This is a substantive report and I'd like to allocate 25 minutes for its consideration. I will take the report as read. I'm aware there are questions on people culture and tell Jane, so I'll invite councillor Chadder to start with her question.
I think the question's been covered in the previous discussion, Chair. Can I just add one point to that though? What I think we're hearing today is something also about the disaggregation of data and inclusive economy. Maybe this is something for Conrad to take back for the corporate team. Inclusive economy is also our new, our money, all those other bits as well. Is there any way that we can actually, instead of being presented data for inclusive economy, budgets for inclusive economy, we can actually break it down with housing and the different directorates?
Yes.
Because thinking about the regulators' report, if we're really going to get a grip on this, maybe we need to start changing the way we look at it, because inclusive economy could mask a whole load of other things as well.
We absolutely can. There are, there is a system of risk management, below the top line level that is reported here. So if what we're, just make sure I've got the question right. Next time you would like the detailed risk registers for the individual sections of that department.
Yeah.
Service area.
Yeah. And I think it's also a broader principle of how we now look at housing within the corporate body. So, having budget lines that say inclusive economy and housing, when that's masking things from regeneration, big capital expenditure to revenue as well, I think may hinder us in getting a good grip on that as well.
Yeah, and there's a point, isn't there? I mean, because you've got the risk register for the major regen projects, for example, the nature of those, just inherently they're big, they're complicated, they're risky, and therefore, although it's right that there should be a focus on that, I think what you're concerned about is that there's almost a risk enough focus on some of the other areas of the department. Yeah, I get that point. We can certainly provide that next time.
Councillor Paul.
Yeah, just on the risk register, there's one here on strategic climate change, page 314. It says we're not going to hit net zero target, but the mitigations column is not filled in. It looks like, we're spending resources, we're not going to hit the target, and we haven't put in there what we're going to do about it. Just for completion, I think needs to be added in there to justify the use of resources.
Yeah, it says that we may not deliver on our net zero targets. Obviously, one factor that to enable us to deliver on that will be, issues of funding, which are largely not known. Take the point. I think what was intended to be conveyed by this, but I get the point that the blank box to help with that. Is that that just transition plan that has been agreed is the way in which we will seek to ensure that we do get as close to those targets as we can and hopefully make them. But I certainly take the point about the presentation of that we will address.
Yeah, and also what it does, Conrad, it gives us, all right, we set a plan back in the day. It's not working how you want it to work. We can still change the plan. And I think completing that box would have given us the opportunity to say how flexible and agile we were in that. It just was a presentation thing, but leaving a blank box when you're saying you're not hitting a target.
Well, yes, just for the avoidance of doubt, we're not saying that we are not going to hit the net zero targets, but there is clearly a risk that we will not. And as is well known, there is a significant issue for all organisations of funding for that.
Yeah,
I do agree the presentation point. Can I just clarify one thing, if that's all right, Chair?
Yes.
Are you saying, that we should be adjusting the plan to deliver net zero by 2030, or are you saying that we should be revising the plan about whether to try and achieve 2030? Just so I understand that I've got the right question.
Yeah, well, I'll answer it this way, and I don't want to be seen as a climate denier or a dinosaur. When I'll ask it this way, when the plan came up, it's doing a number of things. And Newham residents have the lowest carbon footprint in the country. From memory, we have about 4 kilotons of carbon. And in the UK, the average citizen has 9, and the average person in London has 5. The figures are roughly the same. Where we are overweighted, it's in our residents burning carbon in their homes, i.e. our residents are living in poorer quality accommodation with poor insulation and have high energy costs. If we were to be agile in that plan, and bearing in mind the social regulator report today, I would say, and it's not for me, I'm not a portfolio holder, within the Just Transition Plan, maybe we just focus on improving insulation. Our answer, maybe not a complete answer, Conrad, to what you wanted. That's the answer.
Yeah, and there's clearly issues of focus there. I think it's worth emphasising, you know, the reason it's called a Just Transition Plan, or one of the reasons for that, is we absolutely recognise that, you know, within London and within the UK, you know, relatively speaking, Newham residents are not the problem, if I can put it that way. You know, relatively speaking, they use less carbon than other groups of the population and are more exposed to some of the risks of climate change, such as, for example, flooding or, you know, poor quality housing and so on. And the plan, you know, has a strong focus on mitigating some of the consequences of climate change, rather than just saying, you know, we must get rid of carbon, although we must also, of course, try to minimise carbon reductions. So, you know, that's why it's described as a Just Transition Plan, to help try and sort of move from one state of affairs that is unsatisfactory from the point of view of Newham residents, but in a way that, you know, is not damaging. I think the example that's been used, for example, if one thinks back to, you know, to the 80s, say, and certainly with the benefit of hindsight, perhaps, you know, clearly, you know, coal mines and similar forms, you know, kind of did need to be phased out, but that was not a just transition. It was, well, probably anything but, and you know, very much the plan is trying to avoid those sort of mistakes.
Thank you, Conrad.
Just kind of following on from that and looking at it a slightly different way, the other issue around this is that the current controls actually also speak to needing more investment, whether that's externally or internally within the directorate, and also drawing on cross-council delivery groups. Now, even in terms of trying to look at those, I think it would be helpful just for the directorate and for the director in his own kind of working environment to be able to have some mitigations there, because otherwise what are we fundraising for?
No, you know, of course the box should have been completed on the plan. I mean, that's just a sort of drafting point in here. I think it's important to emphasise, you know, the team has been successful in raising funds, you know, several multiples of the salary budget for the team. I think it's an area where there are a large amount of grants available. But again, to the sort of wider point on this, you know, the cost of decarbonisation and dealing with things like, you know, insulation of housing stock and flood risk and so on, you know, would be measured in the, well, you know, extremely large numbers, you know, tens, hundreds of millions, if not more. And so, you know, we've always recognised that we're doing everything, hope that we're doing everything we reasonably can to try and address that. But it is always going to need external resource for us to be able to make a big difference in some of those areas. Which again is why we want to try and sort of encourage residents with us to do.
But all I'm saying is that in terms of, if I was a fund, and I am a funder, and if I look at this and I think, well, actually, they're not that bothered. You know, if they're looking for money, but they can't tell me what will happen if they can't. So I think it's more than just about managing the risk. It's also about the culture of that directorate, that it does need to step up and explain itself as well.
Okay, yeah.
Councillor Chowdhury, please.
This report that came out today about obviously it's very bad. And my reading of it is that effectively the council is some landlord. Is there a reason why the decent home standard or the council's role as a landlord is not listed on the corporate risk register? And is there plans to update the risk register? after following today's report to make this a much higher priority for the council?
Yes, I think the risk register will certainly need to be updated following today's inspection report. Obviously, it was prepared, as you can see from the dates on here, a little while ago.
And why it wasn't on there before?
Why the decent homes point wasn't on there before? I couldn't answer that one, but I can get you a written answer from the housing officers.
Any further questions? Okay. Report is for noting. Members present in the, I see by show of hands, is the report noted. Item 12, report on the same programme. I'm aware the council's finances are currently a hot topic, so we'll take this report as read and we'll allocate 20 minutes for deliberation. Are there any questions for Andrew? Councillor Paul.
I'll wait. Yeah, it's just, I'm looking at table 19. Sorry, what page? It's page 234. And looking at the undelivered column. And it's maybe just a comment, really. We've been told there's an expectation of the organisation cutting 175 from its budget. And looking at here, we have an organisation that can't even cut its savings target today. And I really want to know, why have we still got undelivered savings when these savings have been set out and agreed as an organisation, but we must deliver those savings? So one, two-part answer. Why in marketing and central have we got undelivered savings? As a specific question, and philosophically, how can we have an organisation where we've got undeliverable savings when the expectation in future years is to cut nearly 40% of our budget?
Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. So Andrew Ward, Deputy Director, Finance. So with the to the specific questions that was in central and in marketing, I think the slipped savings or missed savings this year on marketing relate to timing issues. Staff restructures take place late into the year. Once you've re-established the team at a cost that can be sustained within the remaining budget, you sort of lost the opportunity to make the full saving through the year, and I believe that's what's happened in marketing. Within central, we have the sort of missed saving there relates to the senior manager review. Posts were to have been taken out of the structure, so the amount we save next year will be more for the same reason, because you'll get a full year's worth of saving from that, but it won't, I have to point out, it doesn't yet total the full 1.5 million pound saving against that.
Just to come back on that, you mentioned marketing, a bit of a restructure, which implies you've had some resources, human resources to play with, i.e. don't recruit, don't recruit. And it appears we messed up the recruitment, which is why we're overspending, right? That's the implication of what you just said, because you said a mismatch of recruitment and debt timeline. That means we didn't do something, or we should have stopped something earlier. Second one.
Let him on that.
Apologies if I misspoke. I think I meant to say structuring the team. So it's I don't believe, and we might take this up with the responsible manager, but I don't believe it's an issue of recruiting. It's more about restructuring the team through the council's recognised restructure policies. That does take some time. That time is sort of eaten into the opportunity to make the full.
Just a final comment, if I can, Chair.
Yes.
We have a 3-year transformation plan where the indication is to save £30 million, 39 over the. We've got to take out 72 million, I think it is, it was Appendix A, which was passed by the Cabinet today, and Appendix B, total about 72 or 74, whatever. And we've got to get to 175. I hope that in future years, we don't have similar rationales as to why we haven't hit our savings. Right? And Koshy will say, you know, eggs are eggs and things happen. But again, our slippage continually has been about 18 to 20% for a number of years now, right? So there's a culture of we don't really have to hit the savings. And my fear is, and it's more a philosophical point, there is something culturally about us where we don't hit our savings, but then on one hand, as finance, you're asking us to trust you, but you're going to hit 175 into the medium term.
Andrew.
So just to comment on the point about delivery of savings, really, it is important that we take steps to make arrangements to get those savings delivered sort of by the 1st of April financial year, so the start of the financial year, so things are in place. The Cabinet report Councillor refers to was received yesterday, I believe, sorry, I think on what as said yesterday, and the savings certainly in Appendix A were agreed, and then there is more work and consultation to do in Appendix B of that Cabinet report. That is that is in advance of the year that we're looking at here. So earlier work being done and more time to put the savings in April so they can be delivered in full. It's a point well made and heard.
I think just the other point, Andrew, isn't it? It's not finance's responsibility to deliver savings, isn't the services, the directorates have responsibility.
Yes, the finance have a responsibility to report on the delivery of savings, and that's what this extract from the budget monitoring does. But yes, the responsible managers are the service managers.
Yeah, just you said finance, but it is the directorates.
I thought these were the disciplinarians in the organisation.
No, the directorates are tasked, they discuss and agree their savings. Yes, just.
I just looked at Conrad and thought disciplinarian and.
No. Conrad has a role, but the directorates, but peers as other corporate directors.
Thank you.
Yes.
Please may the minutes note that.
Councillor Chowdhury, please.
Just to clarify that reading is correctly, so it says in 24-25 we've already delivered 5 million savings.
Can you give the page reference, please?
8241. By the way, this spreadsheet is very useful. It'd be good to get a better version of this or cut down version of it. So it's just that we've made 5 million of savings, which is around 53%. Is the assumption therefore that the other 77% will be done in the remaining 6 months of this financial year? And is that realistic?
Thank you, Councillor. So on page 235, there's a summary table, which is the colourful table there. The 5 million is in the blue column, which is the absolutely secured, fully delivered savings, very confident completely in those. There's another nearly 18 million pounds in the green column where service managers have judged that they are on track to deliver that amount. The yellows basically relate to where they've had to substitute, we'll make a mitigation, so can't quite deliver the saving in the manner that was set out, and we'll need to substitute in year to compensate for that, which is what you would expect service managers to do in that position. The amber indicates those savings where they are making progress, but the delivery is slipping. So we're not expecting, those figures we're not expecting to be saved in this financial year. And the reds are those where there is more serious non-delivery issues for the year. So in total, we've got, sorry, I'll just talk about that table a little bit more if I may. I mean, in total, yes. 32 million. The actual savings introduced for the financial year were, I think, closer to 22, but we do continue to track savings that are happening in previous years. So that's why it's total 32 million. And on this report, we're sort of looking at about, I suppose that's 84% delivery against that 32 million for the year, including some substitutions to be sure, but
That's assuming that by the end of the financial year, that 17 million is delivered.
yes.
So we won't be here in like 6 months' time and told that 17 million was.
Yeah, I mean, this is all consistent and in line with the financial forecasts which are compiled as well. So.
Any further comments, questions for? Okay. Okay, this report is for noting to members present in the room, I see by a show of hands, is the report noted. Thank you, Andrew. Item 13, local audit backlog rebuilding assurance. I will allocate 15 minutes for this item. I'll invite Munir to give a brief explanation and followed by any questions from Munir.
Thank you. Manu Hall, Head of Finance for Financial Control and Chief Accountant. This report is just to give members some background and the FRC guidance of what the process is for rebuilding assurance, given the national issue with audits across the board not being completed. As members are aware, we had the 21-22 accounts signed off. So it's for the financial years 23-24 and then going forwards for the duration of the current contract that was awarded by the PSAA. And the FRC have produced a guidance to help members and others who are interested in the local authority accounts process and what some of the meanings for the audits going in the next few years imply.
Councillor Paul.
Obviously, if the accounts were qualified or not qualified, obviously that has an implication on our borrowing requirement, doesn't it, to potential lenders? I'm just thinking about I get this is on a hardy perennial for a number of years, right? I'm thinking, what is the implications of us as Neo? Is that borrowing costs going up?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so that's an issue that's been discussed at some length. And David, from EY, may be able to provide some perspective on that as well. I mean, in terms of borrowing from the Public Works Loan Board, the answer is no. It doesn't have an impact on that. Clearly, one of the things, an external funder, and we do have loans from external funders, and we might seek others in the future. One of the things they're going to do is to look at your books and a qualified or going further, some of these cases, a claimed audit opinion, would on the face of it be a massive red flag. I mean, that is a point that local authority representatives, have made, very, very strongly that there needs to be sort of, explanation to financial institutions around it. So it's a point that the Financial Reporting Council, is well aware of. I was meeting with them tomorrow, and also with the Comptroller and Auditor General of the National Audit Office, all of whom have consistently made this that no one wants to be here, right? I think auditors get assurance over your statements for a variety of complicated national reasons. That's not going to be the case. But that's the way that local authorities don't then suffer the consequences of it, unless, of course, there's actually something fundamentally wrong with what that individual local authority has done. So there is a kind of significant communication piece at a national level to explain to institutions what this means. I don't think that goes so far as me being able to provide an assurance that that wouldn't make external borrowing more difficult in the future. But it wouldn't be Newham explaining that. It would be Newham and a whole bunch of other local authorities and the audit firms and the FRC explaining the context behind it. But I can't give complete assurance on that.
Thank you, Conrad. Yeah.
Stephen, did you have any comment? Okay. Any further queries or comments from Munir? Munir, anything further to add? Munir, anything further to add?
No.
Okay. All right. This report is for noting to members present in the room. May I see by a show of hands is the report noted? Thank you. Item 14, London Revenue Statement of Accounts 2022-23. This is a substantive report and I'd like to allocate 25 minutes for its consideration. We have considered the draft account of account 2023. I invite Munir to give information that differs from the June 20 questions. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As part of the process for getting the 22-23 account signed off by the backstop of the 13th of December, a number of processes have to happen in order for EY to complete certain tasks, and one of which is the committee have to approve the 22-23 accounts, even if they haven't been audited, and EY will give a disclaimed opinion on them. But because of various regulatory processes that have to be followed, the committee has to approve the accounts in current form, and also the annual governance statement as part of the whole process. To that end, we've obviously attached the accounts, the annual governance statements, and the EY value for money report that they've produced, because they have actually completed that part of the work as part of their process.
Okay.
Any questions? Committee understand what Munir has just told us? Okay. I now turn to the recommendations of the report. The committee is asked to, 1, delegate authority to the chair of this committee and the section 151 officer to approve the statement of accounts when external auditors have completed their work and share their audit completion report with members of the committee. 2, approve the final annual government statement for 2022-23. To members present in the room, may I see by a show of hands, are the recommendations agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Okay, item 15, update on the 2023-24 accounts. I'll take this item, the report is read, and we'll allocate 5 minutes. Yeah.
Yes, following on from 22-23, we produced the 23-24 draft accounts. The committee obviously reviewed them and saw them back in June. We weren't quite happy with the reports and the working papers, so we carried on doing some work. And unfortunately, by sort of internal deadlines that EY had set in order to complete all their audits for 23-24, so I'm trying to remember which financial years we're working in, they felt they wouldn't have had sufficient time to do the audit work in light of how long it's taken audits in the past, and made the decision early on that they wouldn't audit the 23-24 accounts. Obviously, they have done some work on it because they had received the collection fund, the cash position. They obviously have to do the value for money work, and they are auditing the pension fund as well. And I understand that is substantially complete now anyway for the pension fund. Obviously, we're disappointed it's not being done, but it's given us time to look at sort of processes we're in finance, and also how we can sort of improve to make sure that the 24-25 accounts do get audited, or everything's to EY satisfaction before they make a decision.
Councillor Paul.
If I follow the logic, we might as well just agree these accounts now then, because they're not going to get any better because EY can't sign them off, right?
No, we'll bring the accounts to the January committee meeting for you to formally approve, because obviously they've got to go through the same process, because they've got to be signed by the 28th of February. That's the backstop date for the 23-24 accounts. Originally, with the previous government, the proposal was May, and there was a chance we could have it done. But when the new administration came in and introduced the new dates.
It'll be the same, just did 22-23, right?
Yes.
And now this is 23-24.
Yeah.
But nothing's going to change, but for procedurally, we're just going to sign this off in January.
Yes.
Got you.
It's slightly more than procedurally. I mean, I suppose you get two sources of assurance on a set of accounts ordinarily. One, the qualified staff and ultimately me, they prepared them and put their name to them, and that they're obviously being done to a proper professional standard, and so on and so forth. You get a level of assurance from that. Ordinarily, of course, you then get that confirmed by the external audit that actually verifies that yes, they are indeed true and fair. And so I get where you're coming from entirely. It's not just a tick box exercise then to bring them back here. That's giving you as much assurance as we will be able to provide. It will be some time before the system is completely reset nationally, and local authority accounts are audited fully again. For essentially part of the kind of complexity of that is, if you take the 23-24 accounts, for instance, obviously, if you think a year ahead of that, the first thing that goes into the 24-25 accounts is the closing balances from the last year become the opening balances for this year. Well, if closing balances weren't audited, then it's problematic for the auditor to then sign the 24-25 accounts, and so it goes on. And this is why the system, for resetting the audit system nationally, is not a 1 or even a 2-year fix. So with considerable regret, it is going to be, as I say, a matter of a couple of years minimum before we're back in the situation of you getting that full set of assurance over any local authority set of accounts. To call it unsatisfactory would be an understatement.
Thanks, Conrad. Stephen, please.
Thank you, Stephen Reid, Auditor. I just wanted to build on Conrad's comments and to the councillor's comments. I think this is a significant matter for the council. You'll recall that we signed off and I suppose it's worth saying at the outset that an audit process can only ever follow a financial statement production process. So you have to produce the financial statements, and then the auditor comes in and audits and gets the support of management through. The auditor will ask questions and queries, and management need to support that process to reach a resolution. There was a significant delay in the council concluding the 21-22 financial statements, which resulted in us signing those off in June 24. That undoubtedly contributed to the 23-24 financial statements. So we had agreed that given the delay in completion of the 21-22 audit as a result of the delay in the financial statements, that 22-23 would not be audited because we couldn't audit that within the time available, and there would be more value to members to focus on the most recent financial year, which is, you'll recall when I presented a plan, the audit plan for 23-24, I set out that we had agreed a timeline with management. Unfortunately, the timeline for the delivery of the financial statements and the supporting schedules and the support of the audit team, management were unable to satisfy that. So we were meant to commence at the beginning of July 24. That was postponed by 1 month. We were then agreed to recommence again in August. We're still not fully ready for the audit process to be completed. And therefore, we had discussions with management around the impact of, what was by that time almost 8 weeks linear. But if you think there are a number of audit resources, there might be 4 members of staff booked on an audit any 1 week. So let's say 6 weeks by 4 members of staff is a significant number of resource weeks which had been lost and could not be re-identified. So therefore, we had a discussion with management to agree to focus on some particular areas where it might be helpful to provide assurance, and we've largely completed that work. And as Munir said, we will be completing the 23-24 value for money work. Members can expect within the 23-24 value for money work that I will be making commentary around the additional investment the council needs to make into the finance team to support the production of timely financial statements and an audit process if we look at the trajectory in terms of the forthcoming backstop dates as a result of the legislation, which has now been passed in Parliament, the backstop dates are eventually going to move to the November of the year to which they relate. If those backstop dates had been in force over the last 7 years, the council would only have had one set of financial statements. The rest of them would have not met the backstop date. So there needs to be a step change in the authority in how it goes about producing financial statements and supporting an audit process so that that can be delivered on a more timely and effective basis.
Stephen, can you just give us a bit more detail about, is it a capacity issue? Is it competence? What is it that you're saying that has led to the...
Well, I'll let management answer, but in my view, it's capacity.
Okay.
It's certainly not a competency issue in terms of the finance team. I mean, most of them are sitting here today, and it's certainly not a competency issue. I think there is a general capacity issue across local government finance. So it's not purely a Newham issue, but there is a need to further invest in the area.
Okay, Conrad, please.
Take that one, hadn't I?
Sorry, just before you start, so is the structure of the team correct, or is it that you don't have the correct structure in the team?
Structure's right, we just need some more resource in it. You know, of course, there are compounding issues here, and, you know, appreciate this. The element of this sounds like an excuse. But, you know, the way that financial statements have sort of piled up over 2 or 3 years, just as it is hard to audit several sets of financial statements simultaneously, it's actually pretty difficult to do the accounting as well because you haven't got a solid foundation. And I think, you know, it's also worth emphasising, you know, the very well-known financial pressures on the authority. I'm in no way, you know, suggesting we deprioritise financial reporting, which remains important. But yeah, as more and more work is needed to be done, the budgets that we've been discussing and savings and so on and so on and so forth, that inevitably creates capacity issues within the team. You know, I've probably been a bit slower than I ought to recognise those and to allocate some more resource into it. It's not just a case of money. I think we've been doing the right thing by, for example, continuing to invest in trainees and apprentices. There are widely recognised sort of skilled staff shortages, you know, across the sector, you know, particularly acute in parts of London as well. So some of the years in which we have been most successful, you know, part of that has been through hiring in, you know, extremely expensive but very, very, you know, good specialist resource. I would obviously rather avoid doing that when possible, but, you know, I would accept that I've been slower than I ought to add to the capacity of that team. But there are a number of competing factors there.
Colson, please.
So I understand, you know, obviously in there are a lot of financial pressures on this borough, and it is being reported, you know. What I wanted to say is there I mean, obviously not completing a set of financial accounts, so not auditing a set of financial accounts is a big concern generally. I mean, it's not, it is. Is this going to have a bigger impact on the borough, on the perception of the borough, and are there other wider implications that we need to be considering?
I don't believe so. I mean, I can't give you a complete assurance on it, but, you know, it is really important to emphasise, you know, that there are, you know, I'm not denying that, you know, there are things that Newham could have done better, but, you know, principally what is driving this is a series of national issues that has led to the entire local authority audit system, you know, reaching this almost sort of impasse, which is why, you know, government has now legislated for these backstop dates to just almost sort of try and, you know, clear the back. Like, I mean, the way the Comptroller and Auditor General describes it, you know, there's just at some point getting an audit opinion on a set of accounts that's 2-3 years old is of limited value. I mean, one just actually has to accept that, and better to try and focus the resources on getting more assurance about more recent sets of statements. But so I think we can provide the assurance that these issues are felt right across the sector.
Okay, councillor, please.
Just a simple question. Obviously, the council's due to make a set of quite severe cuts. And I just wondered, what is the risk assessment for this department and its ability to meet its necessary duty in future? As a result of the fact that there is probably going to be an increase and not a decrease in the said capacity issues, I guess council-wide, unless that's a misassessment of what's going on. I just wondered what your thoughts would be on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're clearly going to have to invest, and we have started to put some more resource into the financial reporting team in order to deal with that. Obviously, unlikely in my mind. I'm not. I've always tried to maintain a position of trying to minimise spend on your corporate departments because I would rather maximise spend on frontline departments. In this case, probably push that one a bit further than it ought to have been. We now need to build up the capacity there again. The slightly wider point in that, I mean, one of the things that you get from your audit is an assurance or a further degree of assurance that the accounts on which you're making your budget decisions are correct or true and fair. Obviously, without that, pretty confident it is not the case, but obviously you don't have that absolute assurance that there wouldn't be a change to the accounts and hence a change to the resources available to the council. That's one of the things you get from the audit process, and if the audit process can't take place, we can't provide that to you. So that is also a risk.
Sorry, just to this would be like part of the investment for future savings, kind of, I guess, to assure that there is
building capacity back into the finance team. And as I say, it doesn't, I think I don't have concerns about the capability of the staff there, and I think we have rightly continued to invest in trainees and other apprentices in order to kind of keep that expertise developing each year. And of course, some staff, good luck to them, move on, to promotions in other authorities. But yes, we would need to put some modest additional capacity into the department.
Thank you. Councillor Paul, please.
A question seeking knowledge and a comment. This team, which has been suggested, how big and how much? And that will qualify my comment.
Well, I will, if I give an example now, team in terms of the team that produces the accounts, the core team, there are 3.5 FTs who pull the core accounts together. Obviously, the rest of the finance team, business partners do their roles and their bit, but it's the core team who pull that together.
How many? Stephen mentioned we need more resource. How many warm bodies are mid-level?
It's
just want to get a feel what I'm thinking.
You don't solve problems on the accounts by creating a massive consolidation team. So
are you saying?
I was just saying, I think
100 grand, 200 grand.
I don't think it's that much.
150. So we're talking 150.
Okay.
The reason why I say that, we're about what, 300 million pound revenue account and about a 3 billion pound balance sheet. What I'm hearing, to spend 150,000 pounds on a good quality team to do the work, assurance will be given to an organisation who's undergoing quite fundamental change. We've got a roughly 40% cut. And in times of stress, what makes sense is having the numbers in front of you, because that cuts through all the chaff. So I would say, for the sake of finding, let's call it 200 grand on costs, and all the other bits and pieces. In comparison to where we are as an organisation, I think that's a small price to pay to get our backstop, which is our financial reporting and data on point, which will give confidence to other areas. There's no point doing a big change of doing these cuts, but we can't rely on our numbers. So that's I speak for myself here. But
I have one clarification point though. Remember, and I'm not disputing, as I said, we need to make, at least modest investment into the team in order to add some capacity there. It's going to be a couple of years at least before you get audit assurance over those. So you're spending that money without actually getting that assurance. Just bear that one in mind.
True, but what I'm hearing, Conrad, is we're going to go through quite a traumatic time in service delivery. We've got to make cuts, shave everything down. That's about resources and the resource allocation. And in order to do that, you need your numbers to be on point. And I would make the point, if you're looking at 200 grand, or maybe outside the meeting, I can see a lot of savings we can make there. But I just want to make the point that hopefully in your deliberations in other places, you can make the philosophical point about you can't go through what we're about to go through without your numbers being on point, because their end's disaster. I've got some ideas. I'll speak to Conrad outside of the meeting.
I think probably just to add in on there again is the capacity issue within the industry. Actual people available to do the work. Is that not a key issue?
That is a key issue.
Right.
Well, Conrad said that you have the apprentices, but the apprentices still need 5 years before they could be experienced enough to be leading on audits and doing the work. So there's a long time lag before we have people available to do what we need to do. Andrew.
Just to add to that, I'm retaining key members of staff.
Oh, then that's another issue that has to be looked at, how you.
Right.
Not that we don't see it as a mark of success when people progress through and get.
Yes, people will move on, personal development and that, so that it's a dual issue, how you manage development and opportunities for people and bringing people in. Did you have anything to say?
I mean, it's a relatively minor comment in the context of the discussion, but it's a really important comment in the context of supporting the reset and the recovery of the local audit market. And as Conrad referenced earlier, the local audit in England finds itself in this position for a whole complex set of circumstances and reasons. And the government, working with the National Audit Office and the FRC, devised these set of proposals, which brings in the backstop dates over the 5 years. Another fundamental and really important element is what CIFA's going to do in terms of reviewing the complexity of the local government financial statements, because that in itself makes the ability to attract and retain skilled finance professionals and similarly auditors who understand and want to specialise in local government financial reporting very much more difficult. And it also makes financial statements in local government very much more difficult for elected members. Because they are extremely complex documents, and my personal view is they are over complex, for which they need to study.
Thank you, Councillor Paul.
Obviously, our accounts will be more complex. I just looked up because we've got Populo, for example. We've got huge balance sheet, off balance sheet items, which have to be incorporated into our group accounts. Obviously, someone's got to do the work. Is that an element of complexity we talk about? And if so, should we not be charging this, like the Populos, a surcharge for the additional work they're doing? Because if we're just like a boring organisation, no building company, just sweep the streets, keep the kids happy, the accounts will be easier to do. But because we've got these literally, SBB vehicles sitting outside our account, it adds complexity. I'm thinking in ways of supporting that resource. Is it something we should be surcharging these outsourced companies we've got in order we can backfill the core resource in order to support us doing the accounts of all our group entities? tell me if I'm talking nonsense, but just make.
Yeah, let me, sorry, councillor, let me come in first and then Conrad will want to. I mean, in my experience, it is not unusual for local government bodies to have other entities through which they deliver services. So, you know, a group structure in itself does not add overly to the financial statement preparation burden or the audit burden. It does make it more complex, but that's not a feature that is particularly unusual either in local government or obviously in the private sector. The real challenge with local government financial statements are the basis on which they are required to be prepared, which is IFRS, which is a standard recognised basis of preparation of financial statements. But then, because of the nature of local government, there are a number of amendments that have been made to IFRS and statutory overrides put in place, which adds the complexity. So they're neither purely IFRS or not IFRS. It's this hybrid because of the different purposes which financial statements and local government are trying to serve. And that, in my view, is what adds to the complexity.
Okay. Thank you. But you see why
that abbreviation stands IFRS.
International Financial Reporting Standards.
Sorry, International Financial Reporting Standards.
we went down a rabbit hole, didn't we? Oh, that was good.
No, it's important information to create clarity. Councillor Chowdhury, thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, huge respect for the work you do. I remember one of the things I learned being an auditor was how hard it is. So, but one thing I was thinking of as we had a conversation, there was a lot of conversation at KPMG around automation of audit process and lots of investment in automation of some of this work. I wonder whether there's any conversations on local government finance about automation, or is there any kind of innovative practices that the council is considering how they might speed up this kind of work without the additional human resources?
Well, it's a fair question. It is. I mean, some of the sort of systemic parts of it, if you like, are automated, but the actual sort of preparation of the accounts and consolidation are, you know, largely people driven. I suspect in no small part, you know, because of the complexity we've just been talking about. I don't doubt that we'll get there in due course. I sort of don't feel like trying to be a pioneer in that space at the moment. I'd like to try and make sure that we just, you know, got back to, you know, the sort of solid, timely accounting that we use.
Capacity to be able to.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think it's a fair point. You know, doubtless will be coming, but you know, it's perhaps not our most immediate priority, but it's certainly one we should keep in mind.
I mean, if I might add, I think we're looking at processes that we can do, like quick wins. So going through balance sheets and, well, we've discussed with auditors in the past, is actually cleaning that up, making the data cleaner and easier for the auditors to look at, and making sure that we've got people responsible for specific items, so that it's a lot easier and quicker for EY when they come in to do the audit.
I understand. Thank you.
Just one quick.
Yes.
Have you tried doing things like using ChatGPT to like just write the report? Because surely it's just a case of like putting in numbers and following a standard. You could almost train it on the past, however many accounts that the council has published. That might shave off like a couple of days potentially.
Andrew, I've just added you a new project. No, we haven't. I mean, you know, in all seriousness, you know, maybe we do need to be more innovative like that. We certainly haven't considered using ChatGPT for that, but you know, maybe there's more potential there that we've not realised. I think it's a fair point. But I mean, the answer is no, we haven't considered it. Perhaps we should have done.
Chair, can I suggest first? He's an expert in AI policy, right? And maybe outside of this meeting, because what I heard there, yes, it's a really great idea, but once you're fighting the fire, tomorrow's another day, right? And these guys are doing the accounts. Could you not just, outside of this, email Conrad and, you know, because on chat, all you need is a script, right, to chuck it in. These guys are fighting the fire, and you're an expert in it by the RSA. Could you not just email the guys and say, this is how it works, spend a bit of time with them and help them out?
I'd love to do that. I say RS, I'm going to look at it, yeah. But I think it's my idea.
Yeah. Just adding value, sorry.
But obviously it's easier to come up with ideas, it's much harder to edit.
Well, look,
Okay, any further questions?
Good
All right.
discussion, Chair.
Good. Okay, so this report is for noting to members present in the room. May I see by a show of hands if you noted? Okay, thank you, Meneer Stephen and Conrad and Andrew. Item 16, year ahead forward plan. I will take this report as read and allocate 2 minutes for consideration. Are there any questions or comments?
Is there a process that's been established for the consideration of how this committee will look at the RHS?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're not the
social housing regulators report.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yes. I'll put it on the forward plan and
Yes.
then liaise with officers.
Okay. All right. This report is for noting to members present in the room. May I see by a show of hands? Noted, thank you. Item 17, date of meeting. The date of the next meeting is Wednesday, the 15th of January, 2025. This concludes tonight's business. I would like.
Chair, I had one question I wanted to ask in private session.
Yes. We just close down and then Councillor Chadha would like 5 minutes. We're still before 5 minutes. Concludes tonight's business. I wish to wish everyone good night who's watching on YouTube.
Good meeting, Chair. Thank you.
I now declare the meeting closed. All members, please wait for the clock to confirm the live stream has ended. Pauline?